Setting up and purchasing insurance can be simple sometimes. There's these online ways you can buy insurance. You can go through an agent, or you can go through like an independent agent where they shop multiple companies. But a lot of people don't understand when you're signing the pages, there's about 50, 60 pages that you don't necessarily read through, which honestly no one really does, but there are a few that may. There's a couple pieces that you got to understand in those policy documents. There's exclusions to your policy. There's also underwriting periods and things like that, to where the price could change on you. So let's dive in and explain exactly what are the main pieces of that policy and what are these exclusions that you may or may not realize you're not covered for. The first piece that it will explain is that if you intentionally have a car accident, you are not covered. If it's purpose and malicious, then it's just not going to have a coverage for it. It's kind of like buying life insurance and then jumping off a roof. They're not going to cover that, but you clearly bought it for that scenario. And it's just not something the insurance company will cover. It's not uncommon. I've actually several times seen it where someone purchased a policy and they had an accident right away, or someone took their car and had an accident right away. And in most cases, unless the person was excluded, then you usually are okay in that scenario. The second piece that isn't typically covered is nuclear war. Pretty cut and dry there. If there is a war and there's a nuclear bomb, if you live through it, then that's not going to happen. Any type of a nuclear war is excluded on your insurance. The third piece some people actually think is covered is wear and tear. It's not a warranty. When you're buying insurance, you're insuring the vehicle in case of an incident, an accident, something that was unplanned, sudden and incidental. It's not something that's a wear and tear item, because wear and tear is over the time of the vehicle. So as the tires get worn down, those can pop. As the engine gets older, it can explode. All of the different things that could happen from a car over time is going to be more of the wear and tear, and that's not going to be covered on your car insurance. Kind of going back to the first one, anything that's illegal. So if there's a loss or damage due to illegal activities on your part, then that's not going to be covered. If it's someone that took the vehicle that wasn't allowed to and it wasn't your reasoning, then yes, that's going to be a situation where they're going to cover that. But if it's something that you're doing that's an illegal activity, that's going to exclude the coverage for the vehicle. Now this one's a gray area. So technically insurance doesn't cover loss of vehicle due to drugs or alcohol. So if you have an accident while you're drinking and driving, or you're high, or whatever the case is, and you have an accident, that's not normally in most policies covered on the car insurance. That being said, if somebody's injured or something happens, a lot of the times the insurance may come back and actually pay the liability portion. Be very careful, because I would say most of the time you're going to get denied for that claim. But there are those some one-off incidences where the situation could be dire, where they're going to cover that. So the sixth reason you're not insured or your exclusions are on your policy is if you're doing any type of racing, anything that is for a contest or racing, unless it's a specific policy that allows that or adds to that. For example, I have motorcycle policies that I've written that allow you to do shows and races and go to a track. That's fine. Other car insurance companies and policies will also offer that too. Not very common, but there are some companies do more of the classic style or the beefed up engines and the drag racing vehicles. So there are scenarios where you can get that covered, but on your typical standard car insurance policy, you're not covered for any type of drag racing or any type of speed racing. By the way, that also goes for on the road. If you're racing somebody just on the street, then that's not covered either. Now, yes, technically you could say that you weren't racing and that's on you, but in most cases, if they find out that you are racing and there's a police report, whatever the case is, then you're not going to have insurance for that scenario. This is pretty obvious, but the seventh reason that your car is excluded is because you don't own it. So if you have a loss in someone else's vehicle, then your insurance doesn't cover that. There is another gray area to that. So in most cases, if you have car insurance, almost every company that I've worked with will allow you to rent a car and carry the liability over to that car. They'll usually even let you carry the comprehensive and the collision over if you have it. Keep in mind, you still have to pay your deductible if that happens, and it doesn't cover loss of use. So if that rental car vehicle is in an accident, it takes 8 weeks to get it fixed, and in that 8 weeks they lost $3,000 because they were renting it, then you got to pay that $3,000 back. It's not part of the car insurance. But in normal everyday, if you borrow a friend's car, your car insurance won't cover that. There's another gray area that you can cover that, so there's called a non-owner's policy, and I've got a video I'll link at the end that actually goes over it if I can find it on my channel. That essentially covers you for any vehicle that you drive that you don't own, so it's a liability policy if you were to injure someone so you don't get sued for any of those reasons. It does make sense to read through your policy. I know it's boring and there's a lot of just junky stuff in there and there's terms that you don't understand. And that's kind of what this channel's here for. If you have questions about it, feel free to ask below and I'll try to answer those. Knowing the exclusions on your policy is beneficial so you can understand whether or not something is or isn't covered without ever having to dive into the actual company. You don't have to call the claims department and figure that out on your own. It's good to know ahead of time if the scenarios, if you're going to race it, should you have coverage for that? Maybe you have to get a different company. If you are shopping for car insurance, I'll put a link in the description below to where we work with different companies. I hope this was helpful. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.